What is going on, everyone? Today is April 2nd, 2024. You are tuned into the Invest in Hockey podcast. My name's Anthony Santini, joined here with
Eric Wilson.
and today we're going to be talking about the lead up to the NHL playoffs that are just being announced. I believe it's April 20th was the first game one, I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
that
yeah.
we're talking
Yeah,
about.
April 20th, it's starting up. So could be a couple games that night. I assume it would be 4 maybe to start it off.
So, hey, the NHL's heating up, and so is the playoff hunt right now. We saw a lot of teams that just last week, in last week's episode, we were talking about how hot they are, and then out of nowhere, they're getting cold. We're seeing that with Nashville right now. I mean, look at the Nashville Predators. Like, they were, 18-0-2, getting a point in the past 20 games, I think was a stat, or pretty damn close to that. Out of nowhere, they lose back-to-back games, and UC Saros doesn't look as great. It kind of makes me beg the question, I know it's April, but does April showers bring May flowers? Will this cold little spell that Nashville got stuck in, that little rut that they're in right now, will that actually help them in the playoffs? Because for me, I'm looking at a lot of teams that are getting hot, and I can't hesitate to ask, when is it the right time to get hot?
It's such a good question because for me as a hockey fan, when I see it, I kind of forget how teams end the regular season because there's such a lead up to the playoffs that that 80th, 81st, 82nd game, I don't remember what really happens in them because sometimes you have the situation where you might even sit a player if you've locked up a spot. Maybe you don't play your starting goalie in the 82nd game. It's such a good question because it can start with a goalie. We look at, the Leafs have a certain situation going on. You look at a certain team like Edmonton who, Skinner's been so good for pretty much all season after that slump. There's so many situations you can look at, but it's a very good question and hopefully April showers do bring May flowers. I'm not too sure.
Well, it's hard to predict anything with the NHL playoffs. It's been talked about so many times, dude, how the NHL playoffs are one of the best playoffs in all American sports. And when I watch football, I watch baseball, I watch basketball, obviously it's exciting, but there's nothing like watching an underdog win a game in the NHL playoffs. Obviously, we've seen an abundance of that in the past couple of years with March Madness. But I'm just hyped for the NHL playoffs. I know there's still a little bit more seeding to go, and everyone kind of portrays the story on social media that everything's set in stone, like we saw last night. The Toronto Maple Leafs just kind of pull out with that game against the Florida Panthers, and the storyline was, future playoff matchup. But I remember 2 weeks ago, everyone was saying that game against the Boston Bruins was a future playoff matchup.
Yeah.
So everything's changing so fast right now. Anything can happen at any point, and I just can't wait to see what that final bracket looks like at the end of the season.
I know. I'm so excited. Those wild card ones, wild card twos, they're all going to be able to win a matches. There's not going to be one series that's not entertaining. And I used to think that sweeps were more common, but I don't think they're very common in today's game. I just think that we're seeing a really high-scoring game. We're seeing teams come back from 2-0 down, 3-0 down. I think that anything's possible in a series, and I think 7 games is what you really have to look at when you're looking at how long a series could go.
Well, that's the difference, right? Because even though you might be a higher seed and you get that home ice advantage, winning that first game, let's say if Toronto does play Florida, I believe Florida would be on the road, right? Because Florida would be at top of them in that division, I believe. I'd have to double check. Yeah, as of right now, from what I'm seeing, Florida would be playing Toronto, and it looks like they would have home ice advantage. But if you're the Leafs and you go into Florida, win that first game, out of nowhere, you have home ice advantage. I mean, I know the pendulum can swing the other way if Florida goes and picks up game 2 back at home, but you're in the driver's seat if you grab a game on the road, and that's why I think the NHL playoffs is so entertaining because I don't know another sport where home ice advantage or being at home plays such a big factor.
Yeah, it's a really good question because obviously other sports, I will say the one sport I can think of where home advantage is really prevalent is in soccer, or they call it football in England stuff, but that's just because of how large the stadium is, and but other than that, and that's why they have the aggregate scores. But with the NHL, I totally agree with you. It's just because a team starts with home ice advantage does not mean they have it after game 1, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Moving forwards, the one thing I kind of spotted last night when I was watching hockey was the Seattle Kraken game. I watched about 2 periods. I got to watch Shane Wright score his first of the season, and I was pretty excited because he was alongside veteran Jordan Eberle, who collected his 700th point. Would you have guessed he would have had 700 points?
Eberle, I mean, it's weird because he was, what was he, drafted first overall?
I don't know. I think he was.
I'd have to check what exactly he was. So he was drafted. Oh, I was way wrong. He was drafted 46. I could have swore, was he first? Or no, I'm thinking like the Nugent Hopkins,
Oh
Yakupov,
yeah,
and
yeah.
didn't they have one other first overall draft pick, the Oilers?
Well, I guess I mean before McDavid, yeah. I can't remember who it was now. Oh, Hall.
Oh yeah, Taylor Hall 3. So that was a 3 first overall. But I mean, for Eberle, like to still be playing great hockey, even though he's playing for the Kraken, a team that's kind of regressed after beating the defending Stanley Cup champions in last year's playoff. For Hall, he's in a good spot right now in Seattle. Maybe he could pick up one more contract before he retires. But like you said, last night was a good indication that he's still a big factor for that team.
Yeah, honestly, I never probably have said his name on the pod, and that's why with Eberle, like I saw those stats and like he's played about 1,008 games or something, has 700 points. He's a stud. He scored 63 points last year. No one talks about those 60-point guys. Everyone wants to look at the guys who are close to 100 points, close to this, but he's consistent. And like for when you look at a young guy like Shane Wright or even Matty Beniers, they honestly like you got to give credit to the guys who helped them succeed their first couple of seasons where they're gonna struggle, but if you're looking at someone who's going to help them through it on the ice and off the ice, it's going to be a guy like Jordan Eberle. And yeah, kudos to him for what a career he's had. And I hope he can hit the 1,000-point mark at some point. I don't know if that's possible, but he's going to be 34 in May, and I think then he's kind of going to look ahead at his next contract in a few years. So I definitely wanted to mention the Kraken.
Yeah, I mean, some of the players on the Kraken are pretty young. That's what makes them, I think, a little bit of an electric team. Like, we look at Matty Beniers. He hasn't looked great the past couple, do we want to call it this past season? I mean, obviously, he won the Calder last year and came into this year. I think we mentioned last night it was like his 13th goal, or the other night was his 13th goal of the season, which obviously very underwhelming considering he won the Calder.
Yeah, biggest sophomore slump, I think, for real.
Insane. The sophomore slump is for real. I thought it was only in basketball, but it looks like it's coming to take place in hockey too. We're seeing Shane Wright on this team, Ryan Winterton, Ty Cartier. So some young guys that need that, do we want to call it veteran presence out of someone like Eberle that can still play those minutes in the lineup high up and be effective on the ice.
Yeah, it's nice to see we don't just see a young team thrown out there. We're seeing all those good prospects in their system, whether it's the AHL or still in other systems. But they're going to look a lot different in a few years, whether that's good or bad. They've got a lot of things to address, including their goalie situation. We got to ask ourselves, is Joey Decord legit? Is Philip Grubauer going to be there in a few years? Like, so many questions for them, but I'm glad we could at least talk about the Kraken before we move into our usual talk, or at least the hot talk for the week.
I mean, always the hot talk, and it feels like every podcast there's always something to talk about him, whether it's good, negative, bad, whatever you want to call it. But Austin Matthews has hit that 62 goal mark on his way, and I'm going to put it out there personally, on his way to that 70 goal mark, obviously making history wearing the Leafs uniform. I'm cheering on for him. One of my favorite players to watch in the NHL. Definitely exciting. And the past 15 games, it almost seems to, like the past, do we want to call it 5 games maybe, Marner's been out, that Matthews has actually improved his game.
Oh, he's elevated it for sure, yeah.
Not playing with Marner, which is pretty surprising. And you look at it, he played technically, I guess, second line yesterday. It was Matthews, Bobby McCann, and Domi, I believe, was the lineup.
Yeah.
And you would think if at the start of the season, if you're going to put that out there, it'd be a little bit disappointing. But that line has actually been one of the better lines on the team for the Leafs.
Yeah, it brings out the real threats on the team when you can have a guy like Nick Robertson score a huge goal on a line that when Matthews isn't even out there. Then you see Tavares contribute, you see Willie contribute, and it's like they had lines rolling, and that's what they need. They can't be a team that follows that Oilers sense of things where you're clearly looking after McDavid dry, like things like that. They looked like a team last night, and I mean, although I didn't watch the full 60 minutes, they clearly out-battled Florida. So definitely a positive takeaway from last night. Even though I don't think many games were too overwhelming, I think there was definitely some good hockey, and we have another 8 games on the slate for tonight. So I'm a little more excited for tonight's game just because I want to watch my Bruins. Feels like I haven't watched a Bruins game in like a week or so.
Yeah, I'm fired up all week. Bruins are at Nashville tonight, so that's going to be pretty exciting. Nashville plays, I believe, Winnipeg on Thursday or Friday. I remember looking at that, seeing the video, or maybe that's down the week. But this week's a little bit different because there's so many games on each night. Like looking at it, Monday 8 games, Tuesday 8, Wednesday 5, Thursday 9, Friday 6, Saturday 11, and Sunday 9 games. So looking at it, it's like every single night there's going to be watching good hockey. So many fantasy implications, so many games, so many good games to watch, so many good players. And it just feels like this is the right way to end a season of fantasy hockey. So I'm 100% looking forward to this week.
I'll give you a shout out since you're in the finals of our keeper league. So, I mean, best of luck to you in the finals. You're playing one of our good buddies. And, I mean, although I'm not in the playoffs for that league, I know I've mentioned it. I'm still following along a little, and I'm glad there's a lot of matchups. Even on Sunday, I mean, I hope that your matchup's going on Sunday still where it's not like a 9-1 kind of thing. But either way, best of luck. And I know you had a busy weekend there where you were really following along in person as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the fantasy finals, I'm looking forward to a good week. It's Tuesday today, so a lot of games still to be played. Matthews helped with those 2 goals last night, so I'm fired up. He still has 3 more games left in the week. I know you're not hoping for a 9-1 Sunday look, but I am definitely looking to open up my phone Sunday morning and be staring at a 9-1 score. I mean, I'd be pretty happy with something like that, but either way, it should be fun. I've definitely enjoyed this season so far, and I'm hoping that next week I could start off the podcast saying that, you know, I'm the champ, I'm feeling good, and I don't know, obviously got a couple plans, hopefully, to see some changes in the middle of the week I'm going to see, but yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Like you mentioned, too, shifting to the weekend, obviously winning last week in fantasy, and there's only one reason why I won, and it's pretty crazy to say, but penalty minutes actually help me in fantasy hockey. And for those of you who don't know, we are in a category league where penalty minutes are an implication on your team, and not only an implication, but a positive one at that. So if your player does get penalties, it'll earn you a category. And watching that Saturday night game in Buffalo, in person, actually, I was there. Shout out my girlfriend for getting the tickets. Appreciate that.
Hey.
Matthews, Peterka, and Dahlin combined 32 penalty minutes at the end of the game. Actually got me back in the hunt and won me the fantasy week. So shout out, Mike. You're a good competitor. It's Tuesday and Mike is still mad. He hasn't talked to me or called me back. So a little bit disappointed in that. But I wanted to touch quickly about the Leafs and the Sabres, what I saw. I know, Eric, we talked a little bit on the phone when I was chatting with you Sunday night. But there were so many things I noticed in that game. So to pretty much start off with the Sabres, starting with that top line, looking at Tage Thompson, the first thing I mentioned was his untapped potential that I saw. I mean, Tage, although he only has, I think it's 25 goals or almost 30 goals this season, or I think he did hit the 30-goal mark.
Not yet. No.
Are you sure?
Not yet. Definitely. I don't think he has.
Or pretty close to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to double check for me,
yeah,
but
I'll check for you.
Tage Thompson has so much untapped potential. I think just a couple years down the road, he's going to be in the hunt for the Rocket Richard, obviously battling with Matthews, or who knows, maybe we see Sam Reinhart and Zach Hyman all over again a couple years down the road. But I just feel like Tage Thompson uses his stick too much watching him. He needs to move his feet a little bit more, and he has so much skill, not to discredit him at that, but I just think he could be one of the most dominant players in the NHL, hands down, if he uses his feet a little bit more. I just saw him be a little bit too handsy. I want to see kind of that play that I mentioned from Dahlin, where Dahlin uses his feet, uses his stick, is such a good stick handler, and I can almost put it on the record that I know Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes are having such great seasons, but Rasmus Dahlin is one of the best defensemen I've ever watched before.
Yeah, no, I can love the credit that you give to Dahlin because I've watched a few too, but I know you watched the other night, right? So.
And it feels like I've been saying this for years. I've went to a couple Sabres games in the past couple years, and I've probably watched 5 Sabres games in person. So firsthand, I'm looking at Dahlin play, and I haven't seen this guy make a mistake, man. I don't know what it is. He's so confident with the puck when he plays. He's good with the puck. He makes the right pass, the smart play, the right dump in, the right shot, the right block, everything. The right hit, the right block. He does almost everything. So I'm a big Dahlin fan, definitely looking to pick up some of his rookie cards this summer. I know we're going to have a big chat coming up in a couple months. about investments and all that fun stuff, we're definitely invested in hockey. But for me, I had a great time Saturday night, and looking forward to the next Sabres game.
I'll mention before I forget, Tage has 26 on the air. He's at 49 points as well. So, you know what? He'll hit the 50-point mark. Sure, he won't, have that year like he did last year, but how can you expect someone to replicate such a good, such a good year like that, right? So, another good player that I'm sure you saw. And again, the untapped potential is another great point you made.
Yeah, untapped potential for sure. I think Tage could definitely be in that top 10 offensive players in the league. Obviously, there's not a lot of room going on with McKinnon, McDavid, Matthews, all these great players that are having standout seasons. Draisaitl, all these guys. Willie, too, if we want to shout him out, I guess. But
no, let's not do that.
On a more positive note, too, I know you want to chat about Ivan Fedotov actually had his first start last night against the Islanders. I don't know if you saw that little funny video where he went into the wrong net in overtime, and Sorokin, I think it was Sorokin or
Varley, yeah,
just kind of gave him like a little tap, like, hey, buddy, you're on the other side. Yeah. This isn't the KHL.
Seriously, I thought that, I was like, at first I thought it was Sorokin. I'm like, wouldn't Sorokin like maybe laugh at him a little because they're both rushing? And then I'm like, it's Varlamov. Maybe he just isn't as, doesn't want to say anything because I guess it was a closer game or whatever. But that was the funny part of the night for sure, because I'm sure a lot of people didn't even notice that, and they were just too focused on the game that was happening. But I noticed with Fedotov, he looks massive in net. He's obviously covers a lot in net, but he's one of the tallest goalies out there. When I think of goalies like that, I think of Vasi, I think of a few others, but then you see the other side of the spectrum with, Marc-Andre Fleury. So no matter how tall you are, you can be an outstanding goalie. And I think that this goes back to your point about April showers and May flowers. I think that we've seen showers for the Flyers for the last month, actually, so maybe March and April showers. But they're going to need some sort of change in Philly where they need to start scoring goals, let alone changing their goalie tandem up at all, right?
Yeah, something has to give there in Philly. I just think it's a little bit surprising that although they've had a good season, they're starting to regress a little bit right now. The Flyers didn't have a lot of expectations coming into the season. So from a standpoint of view, you kind of have to be, positive about how the season has gone so far. But I'm going to compare the Flyers to the Vancouver Canucks, and you might be surprised, but looking at the start of the season, you could almost put both teams in the same boat relatively. Obviously, right now, Vancouver's one of the better teams in the West. They were in that, obviously, Stanley Cup conversation mid-season. Mm-hmm. But as the Flyers season has gone on, they've only got better and better, and after Sean Couturier got cut, it just felt like this team is slowly starting to lose games, not look as excited, and if you're a fan right now, you have to be positive about it because they weren't supposed to be in this spot in general. But considering they are in this spot, I mean, to kind of just die out right now, it's a bad time.
Yeah, like you got to be winning more games. You got to be scoring goals. I don't remember the last time the Flyers, beat a team 7-2 or like 6-1. Like it's been a while, and I think that although you see the offensive threats, the young guys, Sanheim had a nice goal last night. Like you see all that, but they're actually not producing. Their goals for. I don't know if you want to check maybe their goals for compared to other teams, but I think it'd be a lot. I think it'd be really low. I think that it'd be lower than some non-playoff teams like the Ottawa Senators, the maybe even the Sabres. I don't know, but they that's the concerning part for me is the goals for mark. And I don't want to put the blame on anyone specifically, but it's simple enough to say that they don't have like a 40-goal scorer sitting on their team, right? So they're going to need multiple guys to score multiple goals per week. It's a little weird for me to talk about that because most teams in the NHL that are in a playoff spot have a 40-goal scorer.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a good point that you brought up. It looks like right now that they're 18th out of 32 in the league. So I'd say mid-pack. But if you're going to be mid-pack and still make the playoffs, you got to look a little bit better than that. So definitely disappointing from a goal-scoring standpoint. I know that was the topic of discussion this summer when we were talking about the Flyers, actually, because you said, I mean, if I were to quote you, I think it was something along the lines of, well, someone has to score 30, right? Like someone has to score on that team. Someone has to be the guy on the power play. And when you were talking about Farabee and all your boys on the Flyers, that was our topic of discussion. So they've kind of gone in the opposite direction of what we were hoping for. Similar to a goaltender, Vezina candidate, teams at the top of the league,
Front runner.
and they lost 5 games in a row. He lost 5 games in a row, and Brossoit picks up that win to get them out of the rut, looking to finish the week off strong and the last 7 or 8 games they have left. But Connor Hellebuyck has not looked like himself at all. From what was a standout goalie all season, he loses 5 games in a row. And even just to chat about Winnipeg in general, they haven't looked good. Like, we've seen so many teams that have what's the word I'm looking for? The expectations. Exceeded the expectations that were set for them in preseason, putting Winnipeg in that boat of Vancouver and Philadelphia generally. I just don't know if can Hellebuyck still win the Vezina if he plays this bad? Like, if let's say he starts 4, 5, 6 out of the 8 games that are left and he loses all of them, like, you almost have it. I know you can't give it to Demko. He's been hurt, but Saros has been playing good. I mean, it brings up the conversation, no doubt.
Oh, yeah. That makes it harder to – maybe the voting's going to be closer, but my opinion is you got to give it to them just because they are going to finish in a top 3 spot in their division. And, like, obviously, the last 20 games of the season are crucial, but the team's been equally bad, right? Like, we've seen, again, a drop-off in goal scoring. I think Velarde's still hurt. I think there's still – right?
Velarde played his first game back last night.
Okay, so a good thing.
But he was hurt for a while, yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's so tough for me, but the unfortunate part for me is that one of these top teams we're talking about is going to be out in the first round because there are so many good teams in the league. And I said this right before we recorded the podcast, but it feels like there's more dominant teams this year in the league that are true contenders, right? Like Winnipeg, Vancouver. Both of those teams weren't considered contenders last season because they obviously didn't make the playoffs. But, like, it's hard. But one of them's not going to make it past the first round, right?
I mean, no, 100%. When you look at it, teams like Edmonton, Vegas, Winnipeg, and Colorado, you're going to tell me that, only 2 of those teams are going to be left in the second round? That pretty much cuts a knife right in half of all the contenders. So if I'm not a gambling man, I know there are some people that do like to dabble in gambling, especially with NHL futures, but you almost should stay away from those teams, right? Like, you got to look at a team like Dallas that could face Nashville, or even a team like Vancouver that everyone's been hating on. It looks like they're going to be playing the Los Angeles Kings in the first round. Like, you almost got to go by the favorable matchup, no?
Yeah, that's why, and that goes back to my point a few podcasts ago for anyone listening. Like, I mentioned that the West would beat each other up, and I still believe that. I think that there are such good teams. Again, I didn't even mention Dallas, and now you made the good point about Dallas, but I think they're going to beat each other up, and then I think you're going to be left with those East teams you're almost forgetting about. And Carolina, who hasn't really been talked about in a week or so since they had the hot run with Gensel there. But, like, it's going to be really interesting once it comes down to the second round. And, yeah, a bunch of teams eliminated, right?
Yeah, a bunch of teams that are eliminated and are kind of done for the season. I don't know what that's going to look like for the implications of fantasy. I mean, I can't see a player going out and performing super hard. I know we saw Shane Wright get pulled up in the lineup from the AHL yesterday, and that kind of brings up the question, is that why teams do it so late in the season? Maybe some players are checked out, aren't really as interested in what's happening. But I know you wanted to bring up the topic of a player that is consistently interested in this stat actually indicates that right there. So
yeah, I mean, Sidney Crosby's the guy, and we don't talk about him enough. I don't think any podcast talks about Sid enough, even if they're a Pittsburgh one, just because he now has 19 point-per-game seasons under his belt, and he ties Gretzky for that stat, and it's just incredible to think. Obviously, goal scoring is going up, and other players are going to reach that mark, but for Sidney Crosby to reach that and be playing out of this world still, I mean, he had a nice a goal and an assist yesterday, but he's playing ridiculous. He is such a leader on and off the ice, and he doesn't just help guys reach certain stats, reach certain point totals, goal totals, whatever it is, but he elevates their games. He gives them great careers. He starts their career, right? And, like, it's just another level what he does. It's hard to even say it on a podcast because words won't ever explain how good he is to the game, right? So Crosby's the guy I really wanted to mention before we kind of ended things off with what the NHL looks like for the next kind of week or so.
Yeah, like you said, I want to touch up on Crosby to say that like you said, he started so many players' careers, made them better. We saw that with Kunitz, saw it with Gensel even, and now we're seeing it with Drew O'Connor, a player that not a lot of people paid attention to last year, but out of nowhere striving a little bit with Crosby. I think he has almost 15 to 20 goals, do I want to call it?
Yeah, probably somewhere in that range.
I think the NHL's in a really good spot right now. A lot of anticipation for the playoffs, and it just feels like this wild card race is still good. Obviously a little bit better in the East with all of Detroit, Washington, and the Islanders all still fighting for that last spot. The West is a little bit tied up, and it looks like the matchups are almost set, but there's still a lot of hockey to be played a lot of meaningful hockey. So for me personally, I'm definitely looking forward to this.
Yeah. Honestly, that's, Sans, I hope you're on the same page. We got to get our stuff done today, and hopefully by 7 p.m. we're ready to watch some hockey, maybe grab a beer or see what's happening, right? So.
Oh, a lot of stuff to do for sure. I don't know about a beer. Let's see what's going on. I got a little paper to write, but hey, maybe we'll dabble. We'll dabble.
Love it. Okay, well, yeah, thanks for listening, guys. We are the Invest in Hockey podcast, and we'll be looking forward to episode 23 next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.
See ya.